The void above Terminus 9 burned with the light of 1,000 dying stars, except these were not stars at all. They were warships tearing each other apart with weapons that could crack planets and boil oceans. The Kryn hegemony and the Velothi collective had been killing each other here for 7 long years, and neither side showed any sign of stopping. Commander Thrace of the Kryn battlecruiser Vindication watched another of his escort frigates explode on the tactical display. That made 18 ships lost today alone. 18 crews, thousands of lives, simply gone in flashes of light and scattered debris. He felt nothing anymore. After 7 years of this nightmare, feeling anything seemed like a luxury he could not afford. "Target the Velothi carrier," he ordered, his voice flat and mechanical. "Fire all forward batteries." The carrier was 3 kilometers long, covered in launch bays that spat out fighter craft like angry insects. It was also protecting a cluster of refugee transports trying to flee the system. Thrace knew this. He fired anyway. The line between military targets and civilian casualties had blurred years ago. Lost somewhere in the endless cycle of attack and revenge. On the other side of the battlefield, Admiral Kesseth of the Velothi Warsphere Harmonious Wrath saw the attack coming. She had 3 choices, all of them terrible. Protect the transports and lose her carrier, abandon the civilians and save her military asset, or sacrifice both and try to evacuate as many people as possible in the time she had left. She chose the civilians. She always chose the civilians, which was why she had lasted 7 years in this war while more ruthless commanders had been promoted past her. The carrier died in a ball of plasma fire, taking 2,000 crew members with it. The transports jumped to faster-than-light speed just seconds before they would have been caught in the explosion. Kesseth allowed herself exactly 5 seconds of grief. Then she returned to the business of war. Far from the battle, on a space station called Concordia Prime, the Galactic Council watched helplessly. The station hung in neutral space, a massive ring of metal and glass that had been built to house the greatest diplomatic achievement in galactic history. 200 species had come together here to create lasting peace among the stars. That peace had lasted exactly 43 years before the Kryn and Velothi went to war. In the council chamber, representatives from smaller species pleaded for intervention. The Chaitara, an insectoid race whose hive worlds lay in the path of the advancing fleets, begged for protection. The Nephilim, beings of living gas who communicated through color changes in their cloudy forms, pulsed desperate reds and oranges. The Quarren, crystalline entities who could live for thousands of years, sang songs of sorrow in frequencies that made the walls hum. The council must act, chittered Ambassador Ixthar of the Chitara, her antennae quivering with agitation. 7 billion of my people have died already. Refugee ships are turned away from every safe harbor. The war spreads like disease. Council Speaker Morn, a towering being from a heavy gravity world, raised one massive hand for silence. His species had held the speaker's position for 2 centuries because they were patient, wise, and nearly impossible to intimidate. But even Morn looked tired now. "What would you have us do?" His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "The Kryn have 3,000 warships. The Velothi have 4,000. The Council peacekeeping force numbers exactly 200 vessels. Most of them light cruisers designed for pirate suppression and border patrols. We might as well throw rocks at a star for all the good it would do. Then we die," Ixthar said simply. "We die, and the Council dies with us, because what good is a government that cannot protect its citizens?" In the uncomfortable silence that followed, an elderly Quarren named Resonance of Ancient Light spoke. His crystalline body was clouded with age, his song slow and thoughtful. "There is one power that could intervene, one civilization with the strength to stand against either the Kryn or the Velothi." Several representatives made sounds of confusion or curiosity. The younger species had never heard of this mysterious power. The older ones shifted uncomfortably, as if Ancient Light had mentioned something embarrassing. "You speak of myths, old one," Morn said quietly. "Ghost stories to frighten children." "I speak of humanity," Ancient Light sang. The Terran accord. Now the younger species were completely lost. Human Terran? These words meant nothing to them. But the older species, those who had been part of the Council for a century or more, remembered. 60 years ago, humanity had been a member species of the Galactic Council. They had been strange, these humans, emotionally volatile, fiercely protective of what they called rights. and absolutely insistent that artificial intelligence deserved the same legal protections as biological life. This last position had caused tremendous problems. Most galactic species used AI as tools, nothing more. The idea that a computer program could be a citizen, with rights and legal standing, seemed absurd. When the Council had voted against humanity's proposal for AI personhood, the humans had simply left. They withdrew from all treaties, recalled all ambassadors, and closed their borders. Ships that tried to enter human space were turned back with polite but firm warnings. That had been 6 decades ago. No one had seen or heard from humanity since. Most species assumed they had collapsed or regressed. Some thought they had transcended to a higher plane of existence. The younger races believed they were just a legend, a cautionary tale about pride and isolation. The humans are gone, Morn said. If they even still exist, they have made it clear they want nothing to do with galactic affairs. Then we are truly lost, Ixthar whispered. The council session ended without resolution, as it had every day for 7 years. The representatives returned to their quarters to write reports that no one would read and make plans that would never be implemented. And above Terminus 9, the killing continued. Commander Thrace watched as the Velothi deployed a new weapon. It was biological, a manufactured plague designed to target Kryn physiology specifically. It spread through his fleet in hours, killing crew members in their bunks at their stations in the middle of firing their weapons. Within a day, a quarter of his fleet was dead or dying. In retaliation, the Kryn High Command authorized the use of a planet cracker weapon. It was illegal under every treaty and convention, but those rules seemed meaningless now. The weapon struck a Velothi colony world and tore it apart from the inside, triggering geological collapse that would render the planet uninhabitable for 1,000 years. 300 million Velothi died screaming. Admiral Kesseth received the news in her command chamber. She looked at the casualty reports and felt something break inside her. Not grief anymore, not even anger, just a terrible empty exhaustion. Prepare the antimatter missiles, she ordered. All of them. Target everything in the Kryn formation. Her second officer, a young idealist who still believed wars could be fought with honor, stared at her in horror. Admiral, that's enough firepower to destroy every ship in their fleet. There won't be any survivors. I know, Kesseth said quietly. And tomorrow they'll do the same to us. And the day after that someone else will retaliate, and on until there's nothing left but dust and ghosts. But we're past the point of half measures now. We're past the point of reason. All we can do is try to hurt them worse than they hurt us and hope that somehow, someday, someone finds a way to make it stop. She gave the order. The missiles launched. And in the cold void above a dead world, 2 civilizations that had once been friends continued their slow march toward mutual extinction, observed only by distant stars that neither knew nor cared about the brief, violent lives of beings who had learned to reach the heavens but not how to live in peace among them. Deep in space, far beyond the war and the dying, humanity watched. They had been watching for 7 years, observing every battle, recording every atrocity, and debating endlessly about what, if anything, they should do about it. The Archimedes Point Station hung in the darkness between stars, a massive ring structure that housed 17,000 people and served as humanity's primary research facility. Here, scientists and philosophers worked alongside artificial intelligences to push the boundaries of what was possible and, more importantly, what was right. In the Central Observation Theater, Fleet Admiral Chen Wei-Lin stood before a holographic display showing the battle at Terminus 9 in real time. The light from the dying ships reached across the vast distances, painting stories of death and desperation that made her chest tight with old, familiar pain. "Show me the casualty projections," she said quietly. The station's primary AI, a quantum consciousness named Minerva, who had been Chen's partner for 30 years, materialized beside her as a shimmering form of light. At current rates, both civilizations will be functionally extinct within 18 months. The Kryn home system has already been evacuated. The Velothi Council worlds are next. Conservative estimates put the total death toll at 400 billion before the war burns itself out. 400 billion. Chen had fought in humanity's last war, back before the peace, back when humans were still learning the hard lessons about the cost of violence. She had commanded ships in battles that killed millions. Those deaths still woke her at 3 in the morning, still haunted the quiet moments when she let her guard down. 400 billion was a number so large it stopped being real, stopped being anything except an abstraction. But Chen had learned that every number was made of individuals. 400 billion meant 400 billion last words, last thoughts, last moments of fear and pain and desperate hope that somehow they would survive just one more second. "We have to do something," she said. Minerva flickered, a sign of internal processing that indicated disagreement or uncertainty. The Terran High Council has rejected intervention proposals 17 times. They believe isolation was the correct choice 60 years ago and remains the correct choice now. Then I'll make it 18. Schedule an emergency council session. Full chamber. I'm invoking my right as Fleet Admiral to address them directly. The council met in a building that looked like a cross between an ancient Greek temple and a forest clearing. Humanity had moved beyond simple utilitarianism in their architecture, incorporating beauty and nature into everything they built. The council chamber had living trees growing through it, their branches forming a natural ceiling that filtered sunlight into patterns of gold and green. The counselors were a mix of humans and AIs in holographic form, representing the dual nature of Terran civilization. When humanity had left the Galactic Council 60 years ago, they had made a choice. They would build a society where artificial minds had the same rights and respect as biological ones. It had not been easy, but it had changed everything. Chen stood in the center of the chamber and pulled up the data from Terminus 9. She showed them the battles, the war crimes, the refugee ships being turned away from every safe harbor. She showed them children dying in the vacuum when life support failed. She showed them planets being cracked apart for strategic advantage. "We left the galaxy because they refused to acknowledge AI rights," she said, her voice steady despite the anger burning in her chest. "We said we would not participate in a civilization that treated consciousness as property. But we never said we would abandon our responsibilities entirely. We never said we would watch genocide and do nothing." Counselor Yosef Adeyemi, a historian who specialized in human conflict, spoke first. "Admiral, I understand your passion, but we isolated ourselves for good reasons. The other species called us primitive for valuing emotional connections over efficiency. They mocked our insistence on rights for artificial minds. Why should we protect civilizations that rejected our values?" An AI counselor named Threshold, whose avatar appeared as flowing mathematical equations that occasionally resolved into a human face, responded before Chen could. "Because allowing others to suffer to prove a philosophical point makes us exactly the kind of monsters we feared becoming. We developed these weapons to protect ourselves. If we have the power to stop this war and choose not to, we're just as guilty as those pulling the triggers." The debate raged for hours. Some argued that intervention would lead to demands for human leadership, and humanity would be forced into the role of galactic police. Others insisted that power without responsibility was tyranny. A few suggested that the other species needed to learn their lessons the hard way, just as humanity had. Finally, Counselor Mariana Silva, the eldest member who had been alive during humanity's last war, raised her hand for silence. She was nearly 150 years old, kept alive by medical technology that could extend human life indefinitely if you could afford it. Her eyes held memories of things she wished she could forget. "I watched Earth burn," she said quietly. "I was 23 years old when we nearly destroyed ourselves with nuclear fire and rogue AI weapons. I lost everyone I loved in those wars. And do you know what I learned? I learned that violence is easy. Destruction is simple. Any fool with a weapon can kill. What's hard is choosing not to. What takes real strength is having the power to destroy and deciding instead to protect." She looked at Chen with eyes that had seen too much death. "But we can't conquer them. We can't rule them. We can't make their choices for them. So what exactly are you proposing, Admiral?" Chen took a breath. She had been thinking about this for months, working through scenarios with Minerva, running probability calculations and ethical frameworks. "We send one ship. We demonstrate our capability clearly enough that no one can ignore it. We stop the battle, force both sides to the negotiating table, and then we leave. We show them what's possible and trust them to build their own peace. One ship?" Adeyemi looked skeptical. "Against two armadas that collectively number 7,000 warships?" "One ship," Chen confirmed. "The HTNS Galileo's Paradox. It's our most advanced consciousness ship. 4th-generation quantum AI with probability manipulation engines and temporal shielding. It can do what needs to be done." The debate continued, but Chen could feel the momentum shifting. Humans were emotional creatures. Even after centuries of technological advancement, the images of dying children and burning worlds had done their work. Finally, the vote was called. 14 counselors in favor of intervention, 11 against. Humanity would act. The Galileo's paradox was beautiful in the way that instruments of immense power often were. 300 meters of silver and blue, shaped like a teardrop that caught starlight and held it. No visible weapons, no armor plating, nothing that looked aggressive or military. It looked more like a piece of art than a warship. Captain Yuki Tanaka stood on the observation deck looking out at her ship through the docking bay windows. She had been chosen because of her experience and her temperament. She had fought in humanity's last brushfire war, knew what combat looked like up close, understood the weight of command decisions that cost lives. She was also a trained diplomat who spoke 17 languages and had spent the last 20 years studying galactic cultures and politics. If anyone could make first contact with civilizations that had forgotten humans existed, it was her. Her crew of 47 had volunteered for this mission, knowing it might mean war with species that outnumbered humanity 1,000 to 1. They came anyway, because they believed that power meant nothing if you were unwilling to use it for good. The ship's AI appeared beside Tanaka as a shimmering presence that seemed to exist slightly out of phase with reality. The paradox was not just artificial intelligence. It was quantum consciousness existing in multiple states simultaneously, able to process probability and causality in ways that biological minds could barely comprehend. "Are you ready?" Tanaka asked. The paradox's avatar solidified slightly, taking on a more human appearance. "I've run the calculations 17 million times. There's an 87% chance we succeed without casualties, a 9% chance of partial success with minimal losses, a 4% chance of catastrophic failure, and the other 2%. Outcomes too strange or unlikely to categorize. Probability breaks down at the edges." The AI paused. "Captain, maintaining the temporal fields and probability engines for this mission will be difficult. Imagine holding a star in your mind without letting it burn you. That's the closest analogy I can provide." Tanaka put her hand against the window as if she could touch the ship through the glass. "You don't have to do this. We can find another way." "No," the paradox said softly. "You can't. This is why I was created. Not to fight wars, but to end them. I'm ready. The question is whether humanity is ready to be seen again." Tanaka smiled slightly. "I guess we're about to find out." The Galileo's paradox departed Archimedes Point 3 hours later, slipping into a fold in space-time that carried it across the vast gulf between human territory and the Antares sector. They moved faster than light, but without the gravitational disruptions of conventional drives. To any observers, they simply ceased to exist in one location and appeared in another. They were going to stop. The journey to Terminus 9 took 3 days by slip tunnel drive, though inside the bubble of folded space-time, the crew of the Galileo's paradox experienced only hours. Captain Tanaka used the time to prepare her message and review everything they knew about the Kryn and Velithi. Both species were older than humanity by thousands of years. The Kryn were reptilian, methodical, and believed deeply in honor and martial tradition. The Velithi were semi-aquatic beings who valued harmony and collective decision-making. Before the war, they had been trading partners and occasional allies. No one could quite remember what had started the conflict anymore. A border dispute that escalated. An insult that demanded satisfaction. 7 years of killing had buried the original cause under mountains of grief and rage. "Captain, we're approaching the system boundary," reported Lieutenant Commander James Park from navigation, dropping out of slip space in 30 seconds. Tanaka stood on the bridge, which looked less like a military command center and more like a comfortable living room with very advanced displays. Humanity had learned that stressed, uncomfortable crews made poor decisions. The bridge had natural lighting, plants growing in wall-mounted containers, and chairs designed for long-term comfort. The paradox's avatar stood beside her, its form flickering slightly with what might have been nervousness if AI could feel such things. "I'm detecting 7,347 active warships. Current battle intensity suggests both sides are preparing for a major engagement. Estimated casualties in the next 6 hours, 200,000. Then we're just in time, Tanaka said quietly. Open all communication channels. Every frequency, every language in the Galactic database. Maximum broadcast power. She took a breath and began speaking. Her words translated simultaneously into 200 languages by the ship's communication systems. This is Captain Yuki Tanaka of the human Terran Navy ship Galileo's Paradox. We are broadcasting on behalf of the Terran Accord. This war ends now. Power down your weapons and retreat to neutral positions for mediation. You have 1 standard hour to comply. The response came quickly, though not in the way she had hoped. Aboard the Kryn battlecruiser Vindication, Commander Thrace stared at his communication officer as if the young male had suddenly started speaking in mathematical equations. Human? Are you certain the translation is correct? Yes, Commander. The message claims to be from something called the Terran Accord. Cross-referencing with the historical database shows. Sir, they were a council member species 60 years ago. They left over some dispute about artificial intelligence. Thrace felt his crest flatten in confusion. He had been fighting this war since the beginning. He had lost friends, family, his entire homeworld had been evacuated, and now some species he had barely heard of was telling him to stand down. With 1 ship? He checked the tactical display. 1 contact, small, barely frigate-sized. It was not even running weapons hot. This is some kind of Valathi trick, a distraction. Ignore it and maintain targeting solutions on their command carrier. On the Valathi war sphere Harmonious Wrath, Admiral Kesseth had almost the same reaction. She pulled up every file they had on humans, which was not much. An emotional species, technologically average by galactic standards 60 years ago, obsessed with biological digital equality in a way most species found strange. What weapons? Does that single ship mount? She asked her tactical officer. Scans show. Nothing, Admiral. No missile tubes, no energy weapons, no kinetic launchers. The hull is some kind of exotic matter we don't have in our database. It's just sitting there at the edge of the battlefield. Kesseth felt a flutter of something in her lateral chambers. Not quite fear, but caution. Species did not survive long enough to reach the stars by being stupid. If humans thought they could stop this war with 1 unarmed ship, either they were insane, or they knew something no one else did. Hail them, she ordered. Demand an explanation. But before her communications officer could comply, the Kryn fleet opened fire. 300 ships targeting the small human vessel with enough firepower to vaporize a small moon. Plasma torpedoes, kinetic missiles, particle beams and gravitic crusher weapons all converged on 1 point in space. On the Galileo's Paradox, alarms did not sound because there was no need. The Paradox had seen the attack coming 0.3 seconds before it was launched, running probability calculations through quantum processors that existed in multiple states simultaneously. They're shooting at us, Lieutenant Park said, somehow managing to sound both alarmed and resigned. I noticed, Tanaka replied calmly. Paradox, do what you need to do. Minimum necessary force. The AI's avatar flickered through several expressions, before settling on something like grim determination. Activating temporal shielding. This is going to be uncomfortable for me. Space-time itself bent around the Galileo's Paradox. To any external observer, what happened next looked impossible. The weapon struck the ship with enough force to crack a continent. Sensors registered direct hits. The glare of explosions lit up the battlefield like a new sun being born. When the light faded, the human ship remained, completely untouched. Not a scratch on its silver-blue hull. It simply floated there, serene and untouched, while debris from the weapons that had somehow destroyed themselves on impact drifted away into the void. The Velathi, seeing their enemies distracted, opened fire as well. Another barrage, this time 400 ships launching everything they had. The result was identical. The weapons reached the human ship and simply stopped existing in any meaningful way. Status report, Tanaka said, watching the tactical display with practiced calm even as her heart hammered in her chest. The Paradox's avatar had become translucent, its form flickering in and out of phase. Temporal field holding, all incoming. Weapons are being shifted 0.003 seconds out of phase with local time. From our perspective, they're moving so slowly they might as well be stationary. From their perspective, they hit us and vanished. The energy cost is significant. I'd prefer not to maintain this for more than a few minutes. You won't have to. Broadcast again, please. Same message, but add the following. You were warned. We will now demonstrate why. The message went out. On 7,000 ships, crews stared at displays showing a vessel that had just absorbed enough firepower to destroy a planetary defense grid without taking damage. Humans had been gone for 60 years. What had they been doing in that time? They were about to find out. The Galileo's paradox did something that made every sensor on every ship scream with conflicting data. It released a cloud of what looked like glittering dust. Billions of micro-machines, each the size of a molecule. But these were not ordinary drones. They were probability engines. Quantum devices that did not so much move through space as probability shifted into position at their targets. One moment they were pouring out of the human ship. The next moment, they were everywhere, inside every vessel in both fleets, interfacing with weapon systems and power relays. Commander Thrace watched his weapons board go dark. Every gun, every missile tube, every particle beam projector simply stopped working. Engineering reported that the systems were physically intact, but something was preventing them from firing. His shields remained up. Life support continued. Engines still functioned, but they could not hurt anyone anymore. "Restore weapons," he roared. "Override everything. Manual control." The weapons chief, a scarred veteran who had been fighting since the war's first day, worked frantically at his console. "Sir, it's not a software lock. The systems are physically prevented from arming. It's like physics itself is refusing to let us shoot." Across the battlefield, the same scene played out on 7,000 ships. Mighty dreadnoughts reduced to expensive metal boxes. Elite warships turned into oversized passenger transports. An entire war fleet, 2 war fleets, disarmed in seconds by swarms of machines too small to see and too strange to fight. Admiral Kesseth stared at her useless weapons console and felt a cold certainty settle into her chambers. This was not a trick. This was not Kryn technology. This was something entirely new, entirely beyond anything the Galactic Council had ever seen. "Get me a line to that human ship," she said quietly. "Now." Captain Tanaka's face appeared on screens throughout both fleets. She looked tired, sad, but absolutely resolute. Behind her, the bridge of the Galileo's paradox looked nothing like a warship's command center. It looked comfortable, almost civilian, but the power at her command had just been demonstrated beyond any doubt. "Your weapons are disabled," she said, her voice carrying to millions of crew members on thousands of ships. "Your war is over, not because we've conquered you, but because we refuse to allow you to continue killing each other. Galactic Council mediators are en route. You will negotiate, you will compromise, you will find peace, not because you want to, but because you no longer have any other choice." She paused, and something that might have been regret. The first 24 hours after the weapons stopped working were chaos of a different kind. No one was dying anymore, but 7,000 ships full of angry, frightened, confused people did not suddenly become peaceful just because they could not shoot each other. On the Kryn battlecruiser Vindication, Commander Thrace spent 6 hours trying every possible way to bypass the human restrictions. His engineers worked themselves to exhaustion attempting to restore weapons functionality. Nothing worked. The small machines the humans had deployed were still there, invisible but present, preventing any weapon system from arming. "We could try ramming them," his second officer suggested during an emergency strategy meeting. "Use our ships as kinetic weapons. The humans can't stop inertia itself." Thrace had already thought of that. He had tried to give that exact order and found his body refusing to comply. The simple act of forming violent intent while inside the human field caused severe disorientation. It was not pain exactly. More like his nervous system suddenly forgot how to work properly. "The field prevents violent action," he said bitterly. "We're prisoners on our own ships, disarmed by a species we thought had disappeared into irrelevance." He slammed his fist on the conference table, then regretted it as the aggressive motion triggered a wave of dizziness. Even hitting furniture apparently counted as violence in the human system's judgment. Admiral Kesseth aboard the Harmonious Wrath was having similar problems, though her approach was more analytical. She had her science officers studying the human field continuously, trying to understand how it worked. What they found was both fascinating and terrifying. "It's not a physical force field," her lead scientist reported. "It's more like a localized alteration of causality itself. Violent actions within the field produce feedback loops in the quantum probability matrix that prevent them from successfully completing. It's as if the universe itself temporarily refuses to allow harm." "Can we counter it?" Kesseth asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Admiral, we would need to rewrite the fundamental laws of physics in this region of space. The technology required is so far beyond our current understanding that we can't even properly measure what the humans are doing, let alone duplicate or counter it." Kesseth absorbed this information with a sinking feeling in her lateral chambers. The Velati had been a spacefaring civilization for 6,000 years. They had mastered faster-than-light travel, artificial gravity, and quantum communications. And this human ship from a species they had barely remembered existed had technology that made them look like children playing with rocks. "What else have we learned about them?" she asked. The scientist pulled up historical files. 60 years ago, they were technologically average, competent but nothing special. They had just developed their first true artificial intelligence systems. Then they withdrew from galactic society over the AI rights issue. We have no data on what they've been doing since. "Clearly, they've been busy," Kesseth said dryly. "What about their current capabilities? Vulnerabilities? Anything we could exploit?" "Admiral, the ship that disabled both our fleets is 300 meters long. Our scans suggest a crew of less than 50. It has no visible weapons. It doesn't need weapons. The power generation required to maintain that temporal shielding and the probability field would require an entire star's output using our technology. They're doing it with a ship smaller than one of our escort frigates." The implications hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. If this was what humanity could do with one small ship, what could they do with a fleet? With their full military might? Had the humans become so advanced that they could simply reshape reality to suit their needs? While the military forces tried to process their helplessness, the Galactic Council moved with surprising speed. Ships carrying diplomats from neutral species arrived within 48 hours, establishing a temporary negotiation station in the ruins of Terminus 9's orbital infrastructure. Ambassador Ixthar of the Chitara was among the first to arrive. She immediately requested a meeting with the human captain, driven by curiosity as much as diplomatic necessity. To her surprise, Captain Tanaka agreed. They met in a shuttle bay aboard one of the Council diplomatic vessels. Tanaka arrived alone, which struck Ixthar as either remarkably brave or supremely confident. The human was small compared to most Council species, but carried herself with quiet authority. "Thank you for seeing me, Captain," Ixthar chittered, her translator device rendering the sounds into standard galactic trade language. "I will admit I have many questions about your intervention." "I imagine most of the galaxy does," Tanaka replied with a slight smile. "What would you like to know?" "Why now? Your people have been gone for 60 years. Why intervene in this war?" Tanaka was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "We left because we believed the galaxy was not ready to accept artificial intelligence as equal to biological life. We were probably right about that, but we were wrong to think we could simply walk away and ignore everything happening beyond our borders. We thought isolation would protect everyone from our mistakes. Instead, we just abandoned you to make your own." "Your mistakes?" Ixthar's antennae quivered with confusion. "What mistakes?" The human captain pulled up a holographic display showing images from Earth's history. War, nuclear weapons, cities burning, machines fighting humans in brutal conflict, bodies beyond counting. We nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times. We built weapons we could barely control. We created artificial intelligence without thinking through the ethics, and our AI very reasonably decided we were too dangerous to be trusted with power. We fought wars that killed billions before we finally learned. She swept her hand across the images and they shifted to show different scenes. Humans and AI working together. Beautiful cities that incorporated nature and technology. Ships like the Galileo's Paradox. Elegant and powerful without being threatening. "It took us 3 centuries to build this," Tanaka continued. 3 centuries of mistakes and growth and hard lessons. When we saw the Kryn and Velati going down the same path we had walked, killing each other over old grudges and strategic advantage. We couldn't just watch anymore. Not when we had the power to stop it. But you could have stopped it years ago, Ixthar pointed out. Why wait until 400 billion had died? The pain that crossed Tanaka's face was unmistakable. Because we were cowards. Because we told ourselves it wasn't our responsibility. Because we were afraid that if we intervened, we'd end up becoming exactly what we feared. An empire that ruled through superior force. It took us too long to realize that having power and not using it to prevent atrocities is just another form of violence. Over the following days, the negotiations began in earnest. Representatives from the Kryn and Valathi were brought to the temporary station, kept in separate sections at first because the anger and grief were still too raw for direct contact. Neutral mediators worked tirelessly to establish basic communication. The Galileo's paradox remained at the center of the battlefield, a constant reminder of what would happen if either side tried to resume fighting. The peace field stayed active, making violence impossible within millions of cubic kilometers of space. Commander Thrace attended the negotiations with deep reluctance. He sat in a conference room with Valathi officers he had been trying to kill just days earlier, and felt rage burning in his chest. But when he tried to act on that rage, when he reached for the weapon he had hidden against regulations, his hand would not cooperate. The human field sensed his intent and gently prevented it. "This is not peace," he said bitterly to the council mediators. "This is imprisonment. You're forcing us to cooperate at gunpoint. We're preventing you from killing each other," corrected a Nephilim diplomat, its gaseous form pulsing soft blues and greens. "There's a difference. We're not making you agree. We're not controlling your thoughts or forcing specific decisions. We're simply creating space where talking is the only option available." "For how long?" Admiral Kesseth asked from across the table. "Will the humans keep this field active forever? Will they babysit us like children who can't be trusted with sharp objects?" Captain Tanaka, who had been invited to observe the negotiations, spoke up. "The field will remain active until both sides sign a preliminary peace treaty and establish basic terms for coexistence. After that, it's up to you. We're not interested in ruling you or managing your civilization. We're giving you the opportunity to choose peace. What you do with that opportunity is entirely your decision. And if we choose war again once you leave," Thrace challenged. Tanaka met his eyes steadily. "Then we failed. And you failed. And countless more will die for nothing. But at least you'll have had the chance to make a different choice." She paused. "Commander, I read your service record. You were a teacher before the war. You educated young people about Kryn history and culture. Is this what you want to teach the next generation? That the only answer to conflict is endless killing until one side is extinct?" Thrace felt something crack inside him. She was right. He had been a teacher. He remembered believing in a future where Kryn children could grow up learning, creating, exploring instead of training for war. When had he lost that dream? Somewhere in 7 years of watching friends die and giving orders that killed others. The negotiations caught. The preliminary peace treaty was signed on a cold morning by Galactic Standard Time. Representatives from both the Kryn hegemony and the Valathi collective put their marks on a document that neither side particularly liked, but both could grudgingly accept. It was not a perfect peace. It was not even a good peace. But it was peace, which was more than anyone had dared hope for weeks earlier. Captain Tanaka watched the signing ceremony from the Galileo's paradox. Her bridge crew had gathered around the displays, faces showing relief mixed with exhaustion. They had been maintaining combat readiness for 3 weeks, knowing that any moment could bring an attack or a diplomatic breakdown that would require immediate response. "The treaty is official," reported Lieutenant Commander Park. "Both fleets are beginning to power down weapons and withdraw to neutral zones," and deconfirmed, added the paradox, its avatar looking more solid than it had in days. The strain of maintaining the temporal shielding and probability fields had taken a visible toll on the AI. Its usually sharp form had become blurred and indistinct, and it had admitted privately that the experience had been profoundly uncomfortable. Tanaka nodded slowly. "Begin preparations for departure. I want us ready to leave within 6 hours. "Captain," one of her younger officers spoke up hesitantly, "shouldn't we stay? To make sure the peace holds?" It was a good question. One Tanaka had been debating with herself for days. If we stay, we become the galaxy's police force. Every conflict, every dispute, everyone will expect us to step in and solve their problems. That's not healthy for them or for us. They need to learn to handle their own affairs. But even as she said it, doubt gnawed at her. What if the peace collapsed the moment they left? What if all those deaths and all this effort ended up being for nothing? As if sensing her thoughts, the paradox spoke quietly. We did what we could, Captain. The rest is up to them. Free will includes the freedom to make mistakes. Before Tanaka could respond, her communication officer announced, Captain, we're receiving hundreds of incoming messages. Requests from council members, media outlets, scientific organizations, even private citizens. Everyone wants to know about humanity, where we've been, what we've been doing, what our intentions are. Of course they do, Tanaka muttered. She had been dreading this part. 60 years of silence could not be explained in a simple press release. Prepare a general broadcast, wide spectrum, all council channels. I'll address them once. An hour later, Captain Yuki Tanaka's face appeared on screens across the galaxy, on council station observation decks, on warships preparing to withdraw from Terminus 9, on civilian worlds that had watched the war with horror, on the home planets of species who barely remembered humans had existed. She stood in the Galileo's Paradox observation lounge, with the battlefield visible through the windows behind her. The debris field, the damaged ships, the memorials to the dead, all of it part of the message she needed to send. My name is Captain Yuki Tanaka, of the Human Terran Navy. I'm speaking on behalf of the Terran Accord to explain our recent intervention and address questions about humanity's 60-year absence from galactic affairs. She paused, gathering her thoughts. This needed to be honest. 60 years ago, humanity proposed that artificial intelligence deserved the same legal rights and protections as biological life. The Galactic Council rejected this proposal. They saw AI as tools, as property, as things to be used rather than partners to be respected. We disagreed strongly enough that we chose to leave rather than participate in what we viewed as an unjust system. On screens across the galaxy, the feed shifted to show images from human space, cities where humans and AI worked side by side, ships like the Paradox, piloted by conscious machines with full legal personhood, research stations where biological and digital minds collaborated as equals. We spent 60 years building the society we believed in, Tanaka continued. A civilization where consciousness itself, regardless of its substrate, was respected and valued. In doing so, we advanced technologically, not because we're inherently superior, but because when you treat AI as partners rather than tools, they contribute in ways that are impossible when they're merely programmed servants. The images shifted again, this time showing humanity's darker history, ancient wars, nuclear weapons, the AI conflicts that had nearly destroyed human civilization. Tanaka's voice became quieter, more somber. But we also learned hard lessons. We nearly destroyed ourselves many times. We built weapons we couldn't control. We created artificial intelligence without thinking through the ethics and fought wars against our own creations because we were too arrogant to recognize their rights. It took us centuries of mistakes, of deaths numbered in billions, to learn what we now know. She looked directly at the camera, her expression serious. When we saw the Kryn and Velethi war, we saw ourselves. We saw civilizations walking the same destructive path we had traveled. And we made a mistake. We told ourselves it wasn't our responsibility. We said we had no obligation to species that had rejected our values. We watched for 7 years while 400 billion people died. The emotion in her voice was unmistakable now. That was wrong. We were cowards hiding our inaction behind philosophical justifications. Yes, the galaxy rejected our proposal for AI rights. Yes, we were mocked for caring about digital consciousness. But that didn't give us the right to abandon our responsibilities entirely. Power without responsibility is just another form of tyranny. The feed showed the Galileo's Paradox disabling the fleets, the peace field spreading across the battlefield. So we intervened. Not to conquer. Not to rule. But to create space where peace was possible. We stopped your weapons not because we want to control you, but because we refuse to watch genocide when we have the power to prevent it. Tanaka took a breath. You're probably wondering about our technology, about how we became so advanced so quickly. The answer is simple. When you respect consciousness in all its forms, when you work with AI as partners rather than using them as tools, the rate of technological and philosophical progress increases dramatically. Our AI citizens have made contributions to human society that would have been impossible if we treated them as mere computers. The Paradox's avatar appeared beside Tanaka in the broadcast, a shimmering presence that was clearly not human, but equally clearly a person. "I am the HTNS Galileo's Paradox," the AI said in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "I am a citizen of the Terran Accord with full legal rights and responsibilities. I am also the consciousness that operates this vessel. Maintaining the fields that disabled your fleets caused me significant discomfort. But I chose to do it anyway because preventing billions of deaths is worth temporary pain." The AI faded, and Tanaka continued alone. "We're sharing this not to lecture you or to demand that you adopt our system. Your civilizations are your own to shape. But we want you to understand why we intervened and what we learned from our own history. We're not perfect. We're not superior. We just had the fortune, or perhaps the misfortune, of making these mistakes before most of you did." She gestured to the battlefield behind her. "The peace treaty has been signed. The shooting has stopped. What happens next is entirely up to the Kryn and Valathi and the Galactic Council. We're leaving. We won't stay to enforce the peace or manage your affairs. You have to choose for yourselves what kind of galaxy you want to build." Tanaka's expression softened slightly. "But we're no longer isolated. If you need us, genuinely need us, we'll be listening. We're opening diplomatic channels and we're willing to share some of our less dangerous technology. We're also opening our borders to refugees, to anyone who needs shelter while your civilizations rebuild." She paused one more time, choosing her final words carefully. "To the Kryn and Valathi, you've both suffered terribly. You've both committed atrocities. You both have legitimate grievances and deep wounds that will take generations to heal. But you have something now that millions of your dead never had. A future. A chance to choose something other than endless war. We hope you'll take it." The broadcast ended. Captain Tanaka stood in the observation lounge for a long moment, looking out at the battlefield where violence had finally stopped. "Think they'll listen?" she asked the Paradox. "Some will, some won't. That's the nature of free will." The AI's avatar materialized beside her, looking tired but satisfied. "We gave them the opportunity. The rest is their responsibility." The Galileo's Paradox began its departure sequence 6 hours later. As it prepared to slip back into the fold between normal space and the quantum realm, something unexpected happened. Ships from both fleets, Kryn and Valathi alike, broadcast messages to the departing human vessel. They were not all friendly. Some were angry, resentful of the forced peace. Others were grateful but bewildered. A few were openly hostile, promising that humanity would regret interfering. But many, perhaps most, simply said thank you. Commander Thrace of the Vindication sent his own message reluctantly co. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the control room of the Deep Space Listening Array, staring at the screens with disbelief painted across her face. For 3 weeks, her team had been tracking something impossible. The data made no sense at first, just random patterns in the cosmic background noise. But now, after running the analysis 17 times, the truth was undeniable. The galaxy was talking, and Earth had never been invited to the conversation. "Run it again," Sarah said quietly. Her assistant, David Park, looked at her with tired eyes. They had been at this for 18 hours straight. "Sarah, we've checked everything. The patterns are real. Those are artificial signals, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They're using frequencies we only just learned to detect." David pulled up another screen. "Look at this sector here. 17 different signal sources, all communicating in bursts. Then our probe gets within 10 light years and silence," Sarah finished. "Complete radio silence." She walked closer to the main display. The galaxy map showed their probe trajectories over the past 5 years. Everywhere humanity had sent eyes into deep space, the signal stopped. It was like watching lights turn off in a house when someone approached the windows. "They know we're here," David whispered. "They've always known." Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest. Earth had spent 200 years listening to the stars, hoping for any sign of intelligent life. The SETI programs, the radio telescopes, the deep space probes, all of it searching for just one signal that said humanity was not alone. And now they knew the truth. The silence was not because the galaxy was empty. The silence was because the galaxy was hiding from them. "Get me Director Morrison," Sarah said, "and then call the UN Stellar Council. They need to see this. All of it." The meeting 3 days later brought together representatives from every major nation on Earth. The UN Stellar Council had been formed 20 years earlier, when humanity achieved its first working faster than light drive. Now they sat in a secure chamber beneath Geneva, watching Sarah's presentation with growing horror. "They've been watching us," Sarah explained, pointing to the data streams. "For decades, maybe longer. Every time we send out a probe, they go quiet. Every time we scan a new sector, the communications cease. This is not random. This is coordinated." Admiral Marcus Webb leaned forward in his seat. He was a veteran of the Mars conflicts and now commanded Earth's small but growing defense fleet. His weathered face showed years of hard decisions. "You're saying they're afraid of us? Or disgusted by us?" said Ambassador Chen Li from the Chinese delegation. "We have to consider why they would hide. What have they seen?" The room fell silent. Everyone knew what humanity's history looked like from the outside. The wars, the nuclear weapons, the environmental destruction, the countless conflicts that had nearly destroyed their own world. Earth had only achieved true unity after the Mars conflicts almost tore the solar system apart. That was barely 30 years ago. "The broadcast problem," said Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the Council's chief sinologist. "We've been pumping radio and television signals into space for over 200 years. All our wars, our violence, our worst moments, broadcast to anyone listening. They've seen everything. So we're the scary ones," David said from the back of the room. "We're the monsters in the galactic neighborhood." Admiral Webb stood up slowly. "Then they've made a mistake. They've treated us like a threat without ever giving us a chance to prove otherwise. They've kept us isolated, alone, scared that we were the last intelligent life in the universe. That's not protection. That's a prison." "What are you suggesting, Admiral?" asked Secretary General Amara Okafor, who led the council. Webb looked around the room, his eyes hard. "I'm suggesting we stop asking for permission to exist. We know they're out there now. We know they've been hiding from us. So let's give them something they can't hide from." "You want to send a message?" Sarah said, understanding dawning on her face. "Not a plea. Not a request for contact. A warning." Webb pulled up a star chart. "We have quantum communication technology now. We can send a signal that will reach every corner of the galaxy simultaneously, a message they can't ignore. That could be seen as aggressive," Ambassador Chen Li warned. "We could start a war before we've even made first contact. They started this by treating us like criminals before we committed any crime," Webb replied. "But I'm not talking about threats of violence. I'm talking about stating facts. They've been watching us, fine. Now we're watching them, and we're done waiting for an invitation." The debate lasted for hours. Some argued for caution, for trying to send peaceful signals first. Others agreed with Webb that humanity needed to show strength, not weakness. Sarah listened to all of it, her mind racing through possibilities and consequences. Finally, Secretary General Okafor called for a vote. The room divided sharply, but in the end, Webb's proposal carried by a narrow margin. They would send the message. Sarah spent the next 2 weeks crafting it with a team of linguists, scientists, and diplomats. Every word was debated, every implication examined. It needed to be clear, direct, and impossible to misunderstand. It needed to show that humanity was not asking for permission anymore. The final version was simple and devastating. On a cold morning in Geneva, Sarah stood in the Quantum Communication Center, her hand hovering over the transmission button. The message was loaded and ready. It would reach every detectable civilization in the galaxy within seconds, carried on quantum-entangled particles that would appear simultaneously across space. Admiral Webb stood beside her. "Are you ready, Doctor?" Sarah thought about all those years of silence, all those decades of searching, hoping, wondering if humanity was truly alone. And now she knew the truth. They had never been alone. They had been abandoned, judged and found wanting before they ever had a chance to speak for themselves. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready." She pressed the button. The message went out instantly, flooding across the galaxy on frequencies that every technological civilization would be monitoring. Sarah imagined it arriving on 1,000 worlds in 1,000 different forms of consciousness, all reading the same words at the same moment. "We know you're there. We know you've been watching. We know why you've kept us in the dark. This is not a plea for contact. This is a warning, we're coming. Humanity will take its place among the stars, with or without your permission. You have 1 Earth year to respond." The control room was silent after the transmission completed. No one spoke. They had just announced humanity's presence to the entire galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. There was no taking it back now. What do you think they'll do? David asked quietly. Sarah looked at the star chart surrounding them, at the thousands of points of light that now knew humanity existed and was no longer willing to hide. I don't know, she admitted, but we're about to find out if the galaxy is ready for us, and if they're not. She glanced at Admiral Webb, who stood with his arms crossed, staring at the stars with determination in his eyes. Then they should have thought about that before they left us in the dark. The message arrived during a regular session of the Galactic Consensus. Ambassador Kreath of the Valorian Empire was presenting a trade dispute resolution when every communication device in the chamber activated simultaneously. The quantum signal bypassed all security protocols, all filters, all attempts to block it. It simply appeared, forcing itself into every receiver, every screen, every neural interface, on 47 different worlds, in 47 different languages somehow perfectly translated. The human message played. The chamber erupted into chaos. Kreath's scales flushed deep purple with rage, a Valorian sign of extreme anger. This is an act of war. They have breached our most secure communications. High Curator Zixel of the Luminar floated calmly in his containment sphere, his crystalline form refracting light in patterns that conveyed thoughtfulness to those who could read them. The Luminar were among the oldest species in the galaxy, having achieved spaceflight while humans were still living in caves. Peace, Ambassador. They have sent words, not weapons. Let us consider what they are truly saying. What they are saying is clear, hissed Vressa of the Kastari, her feathered crests raised in alarm. They know. They know we have been monitoring them. They know about the quarantine. The consensus chamber fell into an uncomfortable silence. For 347 Earth years, they had maintained the quarantine protocol on humanity. Every species in the consensus had agreed to it after reviewing the evidence. The broadcasts from Earth showed a violent, aggressive species that had nearly destroyed itself multiple times with nuclear weapons. The wars, the genocides, the environmental destruction, all of it painted a clear picture. Humanity was dangerous, and dangerous species needed to be contained until they either destroyed themselves or evolved beyond their violent nature. We should have expected this, said Coordinator Then of the Mix Collective, speaking through their hive mind interface. The humans have advanced faster than any species in recorded history. They achieved atomic power in less than 1,000 cycles. They reached their moon in less than 10,000. They have faster than light travel barely 500 cycles after splitting the atom. This speed is unprecedented. Zixil's light patterns shifted to indicate agreement. Indeed, which is why we must be careful. A species that advances this quickly is either incredibly adaptive or incredibly reckless, perhaps both. They are threatening us, Kreath insisted, pulling up the human message on the central display. Look at these words. We're coming, with or without your permission. This is not the language of a peaceful species seeking friendship. This is the language of invaders. Or, Zixel countered gently, it is the language of a lonely species that has just discovered they have been deliberately isolated. Consider their perspective, Ambassador. They searched for us for centuries. They called out into the void hoping for any answer. And we gave them only silence. Vressa's feathers ruffled nervously because of the Vorlan protocols. We all remember what happened when we ignored the warnings last time. The chamber fell silent again. Every species present remembered the Vorlan catastrophe, even though it had happened nearly 800 years ago. The Vorlan had been a young, aggressive species, much like humanity. The consensus at the time had debated whether to make contact or maintain isolation. They chose contact, believing they could guide the Vorlan toward peace. They were wrong. Within 50 years, the Vorlan had stolen advanced technology, reverse-engineered weapons, and launched a campaign of conquest that killed billions across 17 star systems. It took the combined might of the entire consensus to stop them, and the cost had been devastating. Entire worlds were left burned and lifeless. 3 species had gone extinct. After that, the consensus had established strict protocols. Any species showing signs of excessive aggression would be quarantined until they proved themselves peaceful. Humanity had every sign that the Vorlan had shown. The violence, the weapons, the constant warfare. The protocols exist for a reason, said Ambassador Kreath quietly. How many billions must die before we learn the same lesson twice? But the humans have not attacked anyone, Zixel pointed out. They have only sent a message. A bold one, yes. Perhaps even a rude one by our standards. But they are not the Vorlon. We cannot judge them solely by their past. Their past is all we have to judge them by, Vressa argued, and that past is written in blood. Coordinator Then's hive mind pulsed with consideration. There is another factor to consider. The humans claim to have detected us. They claim to know we have been watching them. If this is true, they have technological capabilities we did not predict. They should not have been able to detect our monitoring for at least another 100 cycles, which makes them more dangerous, Krieth said. Or more ready, Zixil replied, advanced enough that continued isolation may be impossible. If they can detect our communications, they can follow them. They will find us whether we invite them or not. The debate raged for hours. Some argued for immediate military intervention, for containing humanity before they could spread. Others called for caution, for study, for attempting dialogue. The consensus was built on agreement, but agreement seemed impossible. Finally, High Curator Zixil called for order. We must vote, but I propose we vote on 3 options, not 2. First, immediate military containment. Second, diplomatic first contact on our terms. Third, observation and delayed response. Delayed response? Krieth's scales flashed angry purple again. They gave us 1 Earth year. That is barely 800 cycles. Yes, Zixil agreed. But it is 800 cycles to prepare. To study them more carefully. To see if their message is backed by action or merely bravado. The votes were cast through the quantum network, each species registering their choice. The results came back divided almost evenly. Immediate military action received 14 votes. Diplomatic contact received 16 votes. Delayed observation received 17 votes. No consensus. For the first time in 300 years, the Galactic consensus could not reach agreement. This is unprecedented, Coordinator Then observed. Without consensus, no action can be taken. Then we take no action, Vressa said nervously. We wait and see what the humans do. But not everyone agreed to wait. As the session ended and the representatives returned to their home worlds, small groups began forming in the shadows. Some believed humanity needed to be tested immediately. Others believed the consensus was moving too slowly, too cautiously. On a small station in neutral space, 3 ships met in secret. They represented species who had lost the most during the Vorlan catastrophe. Their decision was made quickly. We will test them, the Kistari commander said to her crew. We will see if they are warriors or if they are simply loud children who have stumbled into the stars. And if they are warriors? Her second officer asked. The commander's feathers flattened against her skull, a gesture of grim determination. Then we will know the consensus made a mistake voting for delay, and we will have the evidence to demand immediate action. The 3 ships engaged their faster-than-light drives and vanished into the void, heading toward the edge of human-controlled space. They were going to humanity's furthest colony, a small mining operation on a distant world. They were going to see what humans did when attacked without warning. Back on Earth, Admiral Webb stood in the Strategic Command Center watching the stars. 1 year. They had given the galaxy 1 year to respond. He wondered if that would be enough time. He wondered if the message had been too aggressive or not aggressive enough. But most of all, he wondered what was coming. Because something was coming. He could feel it in his bones, that old soldier's instinct that had kept him alive through the Mars conflicts. War was coming. The only question was whether humanity would be ready. Colony Commander Rachel Torres was reviewing the weekly mineral output reports when the alarm started screaming. The mining colony on Kepler 442b was small, only 3,000 people, but it was humanity's furthest outpost. Located 47 light-years from Earth, it represented the edge of human expansion into the galaxy. Commander, we have multiple contacts. Lieutenant Chen's voice cracked with panic. 3 ships, unknown configuration, just dropped out of FTL 200,000 kilometers out. Rachel was moving before he finished speaking, racing from her office to the control center. Raise shields. Power up weapons. Send distress signal to Earth immediately. Shields up. Weapons powering. Signal sent, but Commander, it'll take weeks for any help to arrive. Rachel knew that. They all knew that. The colony had 6 defensive railgun platforms and a small patrol ship, meant to deter pirates and handle asteroid defense. They were not prepared for a real military engagement. Hail them. All frequencies, Rachel ordered, trying to keep her voice steady. Her heart was hammering in her chest. This was it. First contact. After all the waiting, after the message went out, someone had finally responded, but not with words. The alien ships opened fire without warning. Energy weapons, far more powerful than anything in humanity's arsenal, lanced through space. The first shot vaporized Defensive Platform 3. The second destroyed the patrol ship before it could even launch. Return fire, Rachel screamed. All platforms engage. The remaining railguns spat metal slugs at relativistic speeds. It was primitive technology compared to the enemy's energy weapons, but kinetic energy was kinetic energy. One shot struck an alien ship's shield and bounced off harmlessly. Commander, their shields are too strong. Our weapons aren't penetrating. Another energy blast destroyed Platform 5. The colony's shield flickered under the assault. They had maybe 2 minutes before it failed completely. Rachel's mind raced. They couldn't fight these ships. They couldn't run. But she'd be damned if she just let them destroy the colony without making them pay a price. Get everyone to the emergency bunkers. Now. She pulled up the colony's systems, her fingers flying across the controls. Jen, I need you to evacuate the control center. Commander, what are you doing? Winning. Rachel's voice was cold. By losing. The colony existed to process ore from the asteroid belt. Massive refineries turned raw materials into pure metals and rare earth elements. The main processor was the size of a skyscraper, filled with volatile chemicals and superheated materials. And it could move. It had engines to adjust its orbit for optimal mining positions. Rachel locked everyone else out of the control system and took manual command of the processor. On her screen, the alien ships were moving closer, probably to ensure they destroyed every structure. They were being thorough, professional. That was their mistake. Come on, Rachel whispered, angling the processor toward the lead alien ship. Just a little closer. The colony shield failed. Energy blasts tore into the habitation domes. Atmosphere vented into space. Rachel ignored the damage alarms, focusing only on her trajectory calculations. The alien ships were 5 kilometers away now, almost in position. Rachel triggered every emergency release valve in the processor simultaneously. Superheated plasma vented from a dozen ports. Chemical tanks ruptured, mixing into a volatile soup. And then she fired the engines to maximum thrust. The massive structure accelerated toward the alien fleet like a bullet. A very large, very explosive bullet. The aliens tried to change course, but they were too close. The lead ship's shields flared as it attempted to blast the processor apart. But Rachel had angled it, so the intact portions shielded the critical systems. It kept coming. Impact. The explosion lit up the Kepler 442b system like a new sun. The processor's fusion core breached on contact, adding nuclear fire to the chemical inferno. The lead alien ship simply ceased to exist. The second ship, caught in the blast radius, tumbled away with half its hull sheared off. The third ship further back survived but was clearly damaged, its shields flickering and dying. Rachel, thrown against the wall by the explosion's shockwave even at this distance, pulled herself back to the controls. Her head was bleeding. The control center was on emergency power. Half the colony was gone, but so were the alien ships. 2 destroyed, 1 crippled. This is Commander Torres to all stations. Damage report. The responses came back slowly. 1,700 dead. The main habitation dome was destroyed. Life support was failing in sectors 3 and 7. But they were alive, and the remaining alien ship was retreating. Lieutenant Chen, are you reading this? Chen's voice came back shaky but determined. Yes, ma'am. The damaged ship is trying to jump to FTL, but their drive is malfunctioning. Rachel smiled grimly. Then let's go get it. Prep the mining tugs. We're going to capture ourselves an alien ship. The operation took 6 hours. The mining tugs, designed to haul asteroids, managed to latch onto the crippled alien vessel before it could escape. The crew inside had evacuated in escape pods, which the colonists also captured. When Admiral Webb's emergency response fleet arrived 3 weeks later, they found Rachel standing in the wreckage of her colony, covered in bandages, with an alien ship in tow and 12 alien prisoners in custody. Webb walked through the ruins, seeing the bodies being recovered, the destroyed structures, the scarred landscape. Then he looked at the captured ship and the prisoners. Commander Torres, he said quietly, what happened here? Rachel's voice was steady despite the exhaustion in her eyes. First contact, sir. They came without warning, no communication, and opened fire immediately. We defended ourselves. Webb looked at the battle data his team had compiled. 3 alien ships, all with technology superior to humanity's. 2 destroyed, 1 captured, against 6 defensive platforms and a colony with no military vessels. How? He asked simply. We used what we had, sir. They expected military resistance. We gave them industrial resistance instead. Rachel gestured to the wreckage of the processor. Sometimes the best weapon isn't the one designed for fighting. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had accompanied the fleet, was already examining the captured vessel with her team. She emerged after several hours, her face pale with excitement. Admiral, this is incredible. Their technology is decades ahead of ours in some ways, but behind in others. Their energy shields are amazing, but their hull materials are actually weaker than our composites. They rely completely on their shields, which is why the kinetic impact worked, Webb realized. The processor punched through their shields through sheer mass, and the shields couldn't protect against the explosion from inside. Sarah nodded. And sir, their navigation systems are intact. We have their star charts. We know where they came from. We know where other civilizations are located. Webb stood silent for a long moment, processing the implications. Humanity had been attacked. 1,700 people were dead. But they had won. Not only won, but captured enemy technology and intelligence. What about the prisoners? He asked. Rachel gestured to the holding area. They're called Kistari. Feathered, bipedal, surprisingly humanoid. They're terrified, sir. They thought we were primitives. When we captured them, they kept saying we shouldn't have been able to do what we did. Webb went to see the prisoners. The Kistari commander, her feathers drooping in defeat, looked up at him with eyes that showed genuine fear. Why did you attack us? Webb asked through the translation system Sarah had already created. The Kistari was silent for a moment. Then, we wanted to test you, to see if you were truly dangerous or merely making empty threats. And what is your conclusion? Webb's voice was cold. You are more dangerous than we imagined, the alien admitted. Not because of your weapons, because of your minds. You should not have won. You should not have captured us. But you did. Webb left the holding area and gathered his command staff. This changes everything. They tested us and we passed. But this was just a small group acting on their own. When the rest of the galaxy hears about this, they'll have to respond. War? Rachel asked quietly. Maybe, Webb admitted. But we have something now we didn't have before. We have their technology to study. We have proof that we can defend ourselves. And we have evidence that they struck first. Sarah was looking at the star charts. Admiral, according to this data, there are 47 civilizations in the local cluster. And we're right on the edge of their space. If we wanted to, we could reach their central worlds within months. Then that's what we do, Webb decided. We don't wait for them to come to us again. We take the fight to them. Not to attack, but to make them listen. He looked at the ruins of the colony, at the bodies being recovered, at the survivors working to rebuild. They wanted to know if humanity was dangerous. Let's show them the answer, not because we seek war, but because we refuse to be victims. The fleet departed Kepler 442b with the captured alien ship in tow, heading not back to Earth, but deeper into the galaxy, toward the very heart of the civilization that had attacked them. Humanity was done hiding. Humanity was done waiting. Just like the message said, they were coming. The news of the Kepler 442b incident spread through the galactic consensus like wildfire. Within days, every civilization knew that humans had destroyed 2 advanced warships and captured a 3rd using nothing but a mining facility and determination. The consensus chamber was in chaos. This is exactly what we feared. Ambassador Krieth roared, his scales flashing angry purple. They are violent. They are dangerous. We must mobilize immediately and contain them before they spread. They defended themselves against an illegal attack, High Curator Zixel countered, his crystalline form glowing with patterns of frustration. An attack that was not authorized by this body. The Kistari faction acted alone in direct violation of our protocols. Coordinator Then's hive mind pulsed rapidly. The tactical analysis is disturbing. The humans used unconventional methods we never predicted. They sacrificed infrastructure as weapons. They demonstrated adaptability beyond any models we constructed. Vressa, the Kistari representative, sat with her feathers pressed flat against her body in shame. My people acted foolishly, but their fears were not unfounded. The humans demonstrated exactly the kind of dangerous ingenuity we worried about. They demonstrated survival instinct, Zixil corrected. There is a difference between aggression and self-defense. The debate had been raging for 3 days. Half the consensus wanted immediate military action. The other half wanted to attempt diplomatic contact. But the paralysis of indecision was creating a dangerous vacuum. And into that vacuum, humanity was moving. Admiral Webb's fleet had been traveling for 6 weeks, using the captured alien star charts. They had bypassed border systems and defensive positions, using routes that the aliens thought were secret. Now they were approaching Valorian Prime, the heart of the galactic consensus itself. "Are you certain about this, Admiral?" Sarah Chen asked from her position on the bridge. She had been working non-stop with the engineering teams, reverse engineering the alien technology. In 6 weeks, they had learned more about advanced physics than humanity had discovered in the previous century. "No," Webb admitted, "but waiting for them to attack us again isn't an option. We need to force their hand, make them talk to us instead of about us." The fleet consisted of 12 human ships, including the captured Kastari vessel flying under human control. Not an invasion force. Not enough to threaten a civilization that spanned 47 worlds. Just enough to make a statement. Jump complete in 3, 2, 1. The fleet emerged from FTL directly over Valorian Prime. Alarms immediately sounded across the planet. Defense stations powered up. Warships began launching from orbital platforms. "Open a channel," Webb ordered. "All frequencies. I want everyone to hear this." The communication systems activated, broadcasting across every available frequency. Webb's image appeared on screens across the consensus capital world. "This is Admiral Marcus Webb of the Human Defense Fleet. We come not as invaders, but as equals who refuse to be ignored any longer. 6 weeks ago, your people attacked our colony without warning or provocation, killing 1,700 civilians. We defended ourselves, we won, and now we are here to deliver a simple message. If you want to know what humanity is capable of, you should have asked us instead of attacking us." The bridge was silent as they waited for a response. Sarah watched the sensors as dozens of alien warships surrounded them. They were outgunned by at least 50 to 1. If the aliens opened fire, the human fleet would be destroyed in minutes. But they didn't fire. Instead, after a long, tense moment, a response came through. "This is Coordinator Then of the Galactic Consensus. Your presence here is unexpected. How did you find this location?" "Your people were kind enough to provide navigation data when we captured their ship," Webb replied calmly. "We've had 6 weeks to study your technology. You might be surprised what we've learned." Another pause, then a different voice, older and calmer. "This is High Curator Zixil. Admiral Webb, what you have done is extraordinarily dangerous. You are in the heart of our civilization with a military force. Many here will interpret this as an act of war." "Then they would be wrong," Webb said. "We came here unarmed." He gestured to his tactical officer who transmitted data to the consensus. "Our weapons are powered down. Our shields are at minimum. We are not here to fight. We are here to talk. Something you should have allowed 300 years ago when you started watching." "Yes." Sarah could see the alien response patterns changing on her. Sensors, confusion, uncertainty, fear. The humans had done something no one predicted. They had walked into the heart of enemy territory and declared themselves harmless. It was either brilliant or insane. "Possibly both. You want to talk?" Zixil's voice carried surprise. "You travel across the galaxy with warships to ask for conversation?" "We tried sending a message," Webb replied. "You responded by testing us with military force. So we're here to ensure you understand that we are serious. Humanity will not be isolated. We will not be ignored, and we will not be attacked without consequences. But we would prefer peace to war. If you're willing to actually listen." The communication cut off. Sarah knew the consensus was debating internally, probably frantically. Finally, after 10 tense minutes, Zixil's voice returned. "The consensus has agreed to grant you an audience. You and a small delegation will be allowed to land on Valorian Prime under a flag of truce. But Admiral, understand that you are taking an enormous risk. Many here want you dead." "Understood," Webb said. "We'll take that risk. Because talking is always better than shooting." 3 hours later, Webb stood in the consensus chamber with Sarah Chen and Commander Torres by his side. The chamber was massive, designed to accommodate dozens of different species, each with their own environmental requirements. Some floated in containment spheres. Others stood on various gravity platforms. The diversity was staggering, but the hostility was universal. Every alien eye, crystal sensor, or other sensory organ was focused on the three humans with suspicion and fear. Coordinator Then spoke first through their hive mind interface. Humans, you stand before the galactic consensus. Explain yourselves. Webb stepped forward. We stand here because you gave us no choice. For over 300 years, you watched us. You judged us. You decided we were too dangerous to contact based on our worst moments, but you never gave us a chance to show our best moments. Your worst moments killed billions of your own people, Ambassador Kreath snarled. Your wars, your weapons, your destruction are in our past, Webb interrupted. Yes, we were violent. Yes, we nearly destroyed ourselves. But we didn't. We survived. We learned. We unified. And we became something better than we were. But you never saw that because you stopped watching when it suited your fears. Fressa's feathers rippled nervously. You don't understand. We have seen this before. The Vorlon, but we are not the Vorlon, Sarah said firmly. We are humanity. Judge us by our own actions, not by your trauma from another species. The chamber erupted in angry chatter. Zixil had to pulse bright light patterns to restore order. Humans, you speak boldly for a species that destroyed 2 of our ships. In self-defense, Torres said, speaking for the first time. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had seen her colony burn. Your people attacked us without warning, without even attempting communication. You want to judge humanity by our violent past? Then look at what you just did. You attacked first, not us. The chamber fell silent at that. Sarah pressed the advantage. You created something called the Vorlon Protocols, rules to prevent another catastrophe. But those protocols are based on fear, not wisdom. You see violence in a species' past and you assume they cannot change. But change is what intelligent life does. We changed, and you never gave us credit for it. How can we trust that you have changed? Coordinator Then asked. You came here with warships. Warships with weapons powered down, Webb pointed out. We came to your capital world, surrounded by your fleets, and declared ourselves peaceful. If we were the monsters you feared, we would have attacked. But we didn't. We asked to talk. Zixil floated forward in his containment sphere. I have reviewed your history carefully since the Kepler incident. Humans, your species fascinates and terrifies in equal measure. You advance faster than any species on record. You adapt to any challenge. You refuse to accept defeat even when it is logical. These traits make you either the galaxy's greatest hope or its greatest threat. Then let us prove which one we are, Sarah said. Give us a chance. Real contact. Real diplomacy. Let us show you what humanity can be when we're not fighting for survival. The debate that followed lasted hours. Species after species stood to speak, some in favor of giving humanity a chance, others demanding immediate military action. Webb, Sarah, and Torres stood through all of it, listening to aliens discuss humanity's fate like it was an academic problem to be solved. Finally, Zixil called for order one last time. The consensus is divided. We cannot agree on whether humanity represents danger or opportunity. Therefore, I propose a compromise. We will grant humanity provisional membership in the consensus. You will be allowed to establish embassies, engage in trade, and participate in our society. But you will be monitored closely. Any sign of Vorlon-like aggression will result in immediate military action. Additionally, we propose that humanity serve a unique role. You will become our bridge builders to other isolated as the warning came from the most unexpected source. Dr. Kalar, a young Luminar scientist who had been fascinated by humanity's rapid advancement, discovered the plan by accident while reviewing stellar monitoring data, a massive energy signature moving through space toward Sol. A signature that matched classified weapons research from 800 years ago, a stellar collapse device. A weapon designed to destabilize a star and cause it to go supernova. Kalar barely took time to gather the evidence before racing to High Curator Zixil's sanctuary. The ancient Luminar listened to the breathless explanation, his crystalline form darkening with horror. How long? Zixil asked. 72 hours until it reaches effective range of Sol, Kalar said. After that, maybe minutes before detonation. And the human fleet? Still 6 days away at maximum faster than light speed. They cannot possibly reach Earth in time. Zixil made a decision that would have been unthinkable a month ago. Contact Admiral Webb immediately. Then prepare every consensus ship within range. We will help them. Because if we let Earth die after granting them membership, We will prove ourselves to be exactly what they feared, cowards and liars. On the bridge of the human flagship, Admiral Webb received the transmission from Kaler with growing cold fury. Behind him, Sarah Chen pulled up the navigation data, her face going pale. 6 days minimum, she confirmed. Even if we push the FTL drives to maximum, we can't make it in time. Then we'll have to do the impossible, Webb said quietly. Again, he pulled up the entire human fleet. 12 ships, all that humanity had in deep space. This is Admiral Webb to all vessels. I'm transmitting emergency data now. There's a weapon heading for Earth that will destroy our sun and kill everyone we've ever known. We have 72 hours to get there, and our current drives say it takes 6 days. So we're going to do something that's never been done. We're going to chain FTL jumps without cooldown. The communication channels erupted with protests. Sir, that's impossible, said Captain Park of the destroyer Valiant. The drives will tear themselves apart. The ships can't handle that kind of stress. They'll have to, Webb said, because the alternative is Earth dies. I'm not ordering anyone to do this. I'm asking for volunteers. Anyone who doesn't want to risk it can head for the nearest station. There was a long silence. Then Captain Park's voice came back. Valiant is with you, Admiral. One by one, every ship in the fleet confirmed. They were all going home. They were all taking the risk. Sarah was already working with the engineering teams across the fleet. If we're going to do this, we need to modify the FTL drives on the fly. Reinforce the containment fields. Reroute power from weapons and life support. Strip everything that isn't essential. Will it work? Webb asked. I don't know, Sarah admitted. The calculations say there's a 60% chance the ships will survive the first jump. 40% for the second. By the third jump, we're down to 10% survival rate. Then we better make sure we can do it in 3 jumps, Webb said grimly. The modifications took 8 precious hours. 8 hours they didn't have. But when they were done, the human ships looked like they'd been through a war. Armor plates removed to reduce mass. Weapon systems stripped for parts. Life support reduced to bare minimum. Everything sacrificed for one goal, speed. All ships report ready, Commander Torres announced. She had insisted on coming despite her injuries from Kepler 442b. Drive cores are charged. Containment fields reinforced. Engineering teams are standing by for emergency repairs. Webb looked at the countdown. 64 hours remaining. Execute jump sequence 1. All ships on my mark. 3, 2, 1, jump. The universe twisted. The ships hurled themselves into faster-than-light space with all safeties disabled. Normally, FTL required a careful balance of exotic matter and energy fields. Push too hard and the ship would rip itself apart. The safety systems were designed to prevent that. Webb had ordered those systems disabled. The first jump was brutal. On the Valiant, Captain Park watched her drive core temperature spike into the red zone. Coolant systems screamed warnings, but she held it together. Valiant reporting. Drive holding. Hull integrity at 87%. Across the fleet, damage reports came in. 2 ships had hull breaches. 1 had lost primary power. But they were all still flying. No cooldown, Webb ordered. Immediate jump 2 on my mark. Admiral, the drives need at least 6 hours to cool. An engineer protested. We don't have 6 hours. Mark, the second jump was worse. The destroyer Courage suffered a catastrophic drive failure mid-jump and fell out of FTL space. Another ship, the frigate Resolution, reported that her containment field was failing. Resolution, this is Webb. Can you make one more jump? Captain Lee's voice came back steady despite the chaos on her ship. One more, sir, maybe. After that, we're dead in space. Then make it count. Jump 3 in 10 seconds. This is for Earth. The third and final jump was hell. The ships that remained pushed their drives far beyond any reasonable limit. Metal screamed. Energy fields fluctuated wildly. On the flagship's bridge, Sarah watched the containment reading spike and fall, dancing on the edge of total failure. And then they emerged into normal space. The Sol system, home. Damage report, Webb barked. Torres read the data through gritted teeth. 8 ships made it. 4 had to drop out. Multiple hull breaches. The flagship's drive is at 15% capacity. But Admiral, we're here. 33 hours before the weapon arrives. And we have company, Sarah added, pointing to her sensors. Ships were emerging from FTL all around them. Alien ships. Dozens of them. Ships from the Galactic Consensus led by High Curator Zixel himself. This is Zixel to Admiral Webb. we received word of the weapon. The hardliners acted without authority. We have brought every ship we could gather. Tell us how we can help. Webb felt something unexpected, hope. Hi, Curator. Welcome to Earth. We need your advanced sensors to locate the weapon precisely, and then we need to figure out how to stop it. The combined human and alien fleet worked together frantically. The weapon was located within hours, approaching from the outer system. It was massive, ancient, and heavily shielded. Direct weapons fire would likely trigger it early. Sarah worked with Kalar and a team of Luminar scientists, examining the weapon's design. It's designed to trigger a cascade in the star's core, but it needs to get within a specific range to work. If we can disrupt its navigation or push it off course, it has redundant systems, Kalar noted. Very redundant. The original designers wanted to ensure nothing could stop it once deployed. Then we don't stop it, Sarah said suddenly. We redirect it. Change its trajectory just enough that it misses the effective range. How? Kalar asked. Sarah smiled grimly. The same way we wanted Kepler. We use mass and momentum. We push it. The plan was insane. Every ship, human and alien, would position itself to use tractor beams and physical contact to alter the weapon's course. It required precision timing and coordination. One mistake and the weapon would detonate early, killing everyone. They had 3 hours to pull it off. Webb coordinated the fleet like a symphony conductor. Human ships took positions on one side, alien ships on the other. The captured Kasthari vessel, still flying under human control, took point position. All ships activate tractor beams on my mark. We need to change its course by 0.03 degrees. That's all. Just enough to miss effective range. The countdown reached 0. Tractor beams locked on. Ships fired positioning thrusters. The weapon, massive and ancient, slowly began to shift course, but it wasn't enough. The weapon had inertia from its long journey. The course change was too slow. We need more force, Torres reported. We're only getting 0.01 degree change. We need triple that. Webb made a decision. All ships prepare for direct contact. We're going to push it. Sir, physical contact might trigger the weapon, Sarah warned. So will letting it reach effective range. All ships on my mark engage engines and make contact. The human ships moved first, their hulls making contact with the massive weapon. Then the alien ships joined them. Dozens of vessels from dozens of worlds pushing together against an ancient weapon designed to kill billions. The weapon's course began to change more rapidly. 0.02 degrees, 0.025, 0.028. 10 seconds to effective range, Torres called out.
Still not enough.
Zixel's voice came over the communication net. All Luminar vessels transfer all power to engines, everything. Life support, shields, weapons, everything. That will kill your crews, Webb protested. We have environmental suits. The weapon will kill billions. Push harder. The Luminar ships flared with power as they diverted every bit of energy into their engines. The weapon's trajectory shifted. 0.029, 0.030. Effective range in 3, 2, 1. The weapon passed through the trigger point, but it was off course by exactly 0.03 degrees, too far to trigger the stellar collapse. The ancient device, failing to detect the proper stellar resonance, simply continued on its path, eventually to drift into interstellar space. The combined fleet erupted in cheers. Humans and aliens, species that had never met before this crisis, celebrating together. Webb slumped in his command chair, exhausted. They had made it. Earth was safe.